End of the road. The fin de mois. This is fini.
Tonight's presenter is Mr. Jerry Ross. He's known to pretty much everyone here. Longtime member, past first vice president, past president, dedicated supporter of the WAS. Is also an excellent visual observer with small telescopes and old star charts, which I happen to like also. And we're going to let him explain his program. I'm looking forward to 2 sections of it tonight. And you're on, dear.
Thank you. Since I am Mr. Analog, I get to use as much of the remaining time as I want. I brought a DVD, maybe a little filler material, beautiful selected short subject by a friend in Illinois, but that's digital, and I am analog and carbon-based, and I am numero uno. So if we have no time for the little DVD, tough. Now, where was I? I will have no other gods before me, except Nero Wolfe. Right? When you look upon me, you're looking upon a less successful version, but better looking version of Nero Wolfe.
You're thinner, too.
Much better.
Right. That's right.
Much better looking.
And Dr. Parton is the one responsible for getting me involved in this Meshuggah series. It's wonderful. Moving right along. This, the Skalnate Pleso, it's a Czech name, or the Atlas Beshvar, Antonin Beshvar, is one of the greatest achievements for amateur astronomy, and because it was the professionals generating it in Czechoslovakia. One of the greatest achievements of astronomical cartography ever. Now, the story of the Skalnate Pleso Atlas, or the Atlas Beshvar, in itself is an amazing chapter in astronomical history. And it is not my place here to tell that story. It's a wonderful story in its own right. And somebody, maybe one of these days, somebody like, what is this, your racing form? Oh, yes. Maybe Burton, whom I used to respect a great deal until about 45 seconds ago, will someday do the story of the Atlas Beshvar, or the Atlas of the Heavens. If you ask nicely. All right. At the bar, I will ask nicely, because I will be oiled up. Right now, I have a head of steam. See it? So, the long story of the Atlas Beshvar is that it started out as a black on white atlas. What you have before you, I've distributed them, is the field edition of the atlas, which came out in North America under the baton of Sky Publishing, by my estimation, sometime around 1960. It was the field edition. In the 1950s, the first edition, if I recall correctly, and some real historian will have to tell the story, this is under the auspices of the Czechoslovak Academy of Sciences, came out with a color edition. Now, this is not the original color edition. The original color edition was not a fold-out, and it had a stiff cover, a cloth cover, and it was for library use. And it was the same scale as this. Back in the old days, and a slight digression, what stands before you or whom stands before you, is Mr. Mid-Century. I am the embodiment of mid-century amateur astronomy. Everything I know, learned, or even care about came before 1970. After that, it can go bugger as far as I am concerned. I am frozen in time and like it a lot. So, everybody in the old days who's a real hotspur bought the colored edition in the cloth cover, the library edition. It cost a few bucks. I was too cheap to do that. Too humble, but mainly too cheap. So I bought the field edition, which you have before you. Loose leaves, there's cardboard for field use, because the big cloth thing was for libraries and was on paper. All my friends bought the big fancy library edition, but they weren't really field observing hotspurs as I was, and besides, they were willing to write the check or get their parents to write the check to buy the bloody thing. About 10 years ago, 8 years ago, well, about 10 now, I took the original, I think it was published 1962, 61, field library edition. I got on the bus in Cleveland from a friend's condominium. This is the infamous Raimundo some of you have heard about. He didn't want it anymore. I went down to the Cleveland Public Library. They have a map library in the Cleveland Library. And I had done a little business there before in previous years, and I put it before the head map librarian, and I said, we want to give this to you, Raimundo and I, forever and ever. Because of its provenance, produced by the Czechoslovak Academy of Sciences, it was in excellent condition. Whatever Raimundo owns is always in perfect condition. Well, after all these decades, he looked at it and said, well, what do you want for it? And I said, gratis. This is a donation. You don't want anything for it. I wouldn't know what to ask you anyway. And I don't think even he, as a map librarian, would know where to look. It would be a very difficult thing, I believe, to come up with a price. So it's yours. That edition of the Library Atlas of the Heavens is now in archive storage someplace in the Cleveland Public Library map collection. And Raimundo and I are quite happy to know that it found such a home. This is the new, quote, library edition. No, it's not cloth bound, and it's folded. I was at the National Amateur Astronomers Convention in 1969 at Denver, when the representative of Sky Publishing gave a talk in which Sky introduced this as the new library version of the colored, the full-bore Atlas of the Heavens. This was the deluxe version, as he said, as opposed to the field edition, the black and white, which was still in print at that time. And he explained that it was easier to produce. This was produced in the United States. Easier to produce with the vinyl. It made storage more possible in a smaller space. And moreover, because it was vinyl, it could be, with some care, used in a field application, rather than this delicate cloth-covered, elegant, giant binding, book-like. So,
Gary, do you take questions during your presentation?
Why, absolutely, but it would depend on whom. From you, yes, because you introduced me to Nero Wolfe, so you have protexia.
So does this cover the entire sky, or that which can be seen from mid-northern latitudes, or what?
When the Czechs do it, they do it right. This is the entire sky. We are looking at the South Polar region here. For those of you who don't look at octans very often, right? This is some enlightenment for you. Of course, I've never seen octans myself.
Second question, can you give us some idea of how many degrees field of view this would represent?
I can't,
Okay.
because we've got different projections. We've got, for the equator, there are Mercator projections. This is polar, then there's the in-between, whatever it's called, for the intermediate latitudes, north and south. I mean, declinations, north and south.
Just from the number of, roughly the number of pages, it looks like sort of a few degrees, maybe several degrees, right?
Well, all right, well, hell. Okay, there's the center, which is the south celestial pole. So there's 80 degrees declination, then we got 70 degrees declination and 60 degrees declination south, all right, and then some beyond that.
So that's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And the different colors indicate, obviously, we've got different parts of the Milky Way and the galaxies and the nebulae. So,
Gary, one fast question.
yeah.
When you're using this atlas, are you using it while you're doing your observing? How do you see it? I mean, it's dark.
Well, I got the red light in the observatory.
Okay, that's what I was.
Right, I
wondering.
got magnifying glasses.
Does that interfere with the coloration on it or anything?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, red light. I'm using red light or orange or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
But when I'm in the observatory, I use this. The observatory has their own copy of this and all kinds of other atlases. But let's not digress. This is my very own. But even in 1969, I was too cheap to buy the new deluxe version, so I hung on to my now tattered and kind of smudged up field edition, which you have before you. The field edition does not have nearly the detail and the delineations that the master here does. Yeah.
Those samples never made it all the way around. Could people keep passing them?
Well, I thought that maybe some of you could share with your neighbor and not be anal retentive, right? You know, think of someone besides yourself occasionally. Why can't you be more like me?
Gary, these are really nice handouts with a lot of nice stars. Can I get one that's got the Pac-Man Nebula on it?
Pac-Man's late century,
You know,
so that's not mid-century.
You know, I know that you're a fallen Catholic. You're a La Salette boy, right?
Yes.
So you know what 10 Hail Marys means. Straighten out your brain, and maybe then we can start on your soul.
I apologize.
No, Pac-Man. No, none of these screwball names appears on the Atlas of the Heavens. This is produced by the Czechoslovak Academy of Sciences. These aren't some, bleacher bums. Whatever, the Eskimo Nebula and all this. Right. Where was I? Yes, I was about to be frank. So I didn't buy this thing. Still, well, penny wise and pound foolish. So I entered the 1970s, full stop, with my field edition. And this is the pregnant part of the story. This is all just a warm-up act, because now the true talk begins. I was part of a star bowl, as we used to say in the old days, at the Abrams Planetarium in 1977. A star bowl is sort of like a low-rent quiz show where you've got buzzers and you got a quiz master and you got teams against one another or individuals against one another. And the sponsor of this was, if I recall, the Kalamazoo Astronomical Society with the forbearance of the Abrams Planetarium. And I don't remember the winning question. It was a sort of a gladiatorial match of astronomical knowledge and history and lore, and I won. Now, this is as much of a surprise to me as it is to you. I came up on top of the heap. It was like, not Jeopardy might not be a good example, but sort of an elimination round, and then you eliminate people, and I won. I don't know how I did it, but this was the prize. This was the grand prize, and I must admit, as pardon me?
That very book right there.
This very book.
Wow.
I must admit that I did hesitate before taking it because I thought, I've already got the field edition. I know the field edition is not as good as this, but maybe somebody else could use this more. And then I thought,
No.
c'est moi. No. Now, some other time I'll make a pilgrimage to Lourdes or something, what? I will donate blood, which I was doing all the time. No, I will do some other sort of good works. But now, it's mine, right? This is mine. And now I have, at that time, 1977, this, I could get an argument on this. This was the best amateur atlas in the world that was available. It was the best. And I really loved it and put it to work immediately. Because this is a magnificent achievement. I've said that before, and it bears repeating. This is a wonderful creation of astronomical cartography and a compendium of knowledge in this. And the Sky Publishing deserves a lot of credit for bringing this to North America and eventually producing it. And of course, the Czechoslovak Academy of Sciences, they did it in the beginning. And it was a wonderful gift to both amateur and professional astronomy. And so I had this forever and ever, and my variable star charts are usually precariously between the pages, depending on which field in the sky. And I use this all the time.
Is this only charting, or is there actually explanation or writing?
It's just charts. Now, there is what's called, and this it's grossly out of date. I wasn't going to digress, but it's a good question. The companion to this thing, going back forever, the original library edition, is called the Atlas Catalog. It's a big book. And the Atlas Catalog has its different chapters: double stars, variable stars, very stellar positions, galaxies, clusters. It's a companion book, but does not automatically come with this. It was a separate purchase. And if I was too cheap to buy this thing in the old days, I was not about to shell out for the Atlas Catalog. We've got that at the observatory too, as an observatory accessory. But the Atlas Catalog came out so long ago that much of the information in it is simply out of date at this point. I mean, when I look at double star information, for instance, some of the data are really old, and it's now of limited utility.
Gary, where did the data? Can you give us an idea of how long? When was it originally published?
It was published
where the data, in particular,
in the 40s.
Hemisphere.
In the 40s.
And Southern Hemisphere data came from stations they had down the
Well, I don't know where the, there is the introductory,
Yeah, okay.
you know, the exposition here. I don't know where all the data came from, but I think the very first publication of this was black line on white. I can't remember what scale, and in 1948 is rattling around, but I don't think that's right. I think it came out in the 1950s. 1948 was a rough year in Czechoslovakia, and that's probably why it's stuck up here.
Do you know that, was it first-hand data, or did they use data banks from other sources?
Oh, they had to use other sources.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I mean,
Thank you.
the Skalnate Pleso Observatory is not that big an operation.
Okay, thank
Well,
you.
they didn't do all this themselves. No, they had to go here, there, and every place. This catalog, that catalog, whatever, for stellar positions, for the positions of the deep sky objects, the boundaries of the nebulae and the inner galaxy, outer galaxy. But this is the provenance, or just the provenance of this particular book. A star bowl at Abrams Planetarium back during the early Carter years. As I said to somebody here earlier, before, if I had to relive those days, I would kill myself. But by God, we could drink. Oh, man. Right? It helped. It helped keep me focused on astronomy, right? Because when you're floating, you see all kinds of things in the universe.
What are the
That's-
actual inaccuracies that you're finding? I mean, you know,
Inaccuracy?
it seems
You mean in
like-
the Atlas catalog?
Yeah, why would it be, you know, by the time the
Well,
late 40s came around, they're
It's
pretty...
not inaccuracies.
Okay,
The data that are old,
okay,
of limited utility.
okay.
And I'm not going to pretend that I plow through the entire Atlas catalog with all its various kinds of data, finding obsolete and incorrect things. I'm just saying that in certain, for instance, with double stars,
Oh, yeah, that's-
the Atlas catalog data are getting old.
yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I noticed they have a symbol, basically a short line drawn through a star to indicate that it's double star.
Right.
And then they have 3 little dashes if
You
it's
get
a
a
triple
triple,
and so forth.
yes.
And so on. Is the implication that with a typical amateur telescope you could resolve those, or not, perhaps not?
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Because under the baton of my former god, Riyadh, his star has set.
He has fallen?
Riyadh has fallen out of favor with the party. Soon we will be chiseling his name off the monuments and the buildings, right? Soon he will not have ever existed. It's only in your imagination. Riyadh got me heavily involved in multiple star observing, right? And I would go after some of these stars based on the depictions in the Skalnate Pleso. And the rule of the game was that I would not look up the data. And some of these multiple stars are impossible with amateur instruments. Impossible with the 16-inch bore Schmidt-Cassegrain at the Wien Observatory. There was no attempt to filter the data for applicability to amateur use. No. Some of those double stars are impossible except with a big observatory telescope.
I mean, they do make a distinction. Some are spectroscopic doubles and
Yes.
so forth. They do
Right.
tell you that. In which case you would not expect to be able to see.
No. But the way things are depicted is one does not have, put it this way, it is an intelligent depiction or what things look like. It's good cartography because one doesn't have to guess a lot about what one is looking at on the atlas. So this atlas, or the field edition, are wonderful for amateur use. But in the last 30 years plus, there have been other atlases that have come out. This is not a commercial, so I'm not going to run down all this, because I just want to talk about the Atlas of the Heavens, thinking specifically of Wilde atlas, which is very good. But I don't want to digress. So that is the provenance of this particular Atlas of the Heavens book. There's the good, there's the bad, and there's the ugly. And you just heard the good part. Now it gets ugly. At the beginning of 1964, maybe we ought to stop the cameras. Maybe we ought to turn off the microphones. I don't know who's in this room, right? I don't know. You're working for somebody and it's not us. I wanted to buy the field edition, Atlas of the Heavens, because I had evolved beyond the other atlases I was using. So, ordered it from Sky Publishing. And in those days, that thing cost, I think it was $6.50. The field edition you have before you. $6.50. My parents sprang for it. I mean, it was something useful. I wasn't smoking dope behind the barn, because in those days we didn't have a barn. And in those days, nobody but trash smoked, you know what. Okay, so drink like a fish, but that was all right. We ordered the Atlas of the Heavens, field edition. And it didn't come, it didn't come, it didn't come, it didn't come. So I wrote him a letter and said, Sky Publishing, wrote him a letter and said, no tiki, no washi, or words to that effect. So I got a letter back saying, all right, we're sorry, we'll send you another one. It never came back to us. You know, it had to come in a box, right? Not just some envelope. In a box, cardboard. Never came back to us. We don't know what happened. We'll send you another one. So it came in, you know, short order. All right, I'm up with the big kids. I've got Atlas of the Heavens, zippity-doo-dah. I don't know how many months it was before in the front closet, which I never used, the front closet by the door, I found the one that came originally.
Jacques.
Jacques, right? I say, oh my God. But then, my buddy, Martin and Mill, Diane and Jonathan, met Marty out in San Diego for the 2012 transit. We all observed, the four of us observed the transit together out on I-5, way in the mountains somewhere. Marty's my oldest astronomy buddy. I met him when I was 16. No, I think I met him when I was 15, maybe 14. Marty didn't have anything like this. And by this point, Marty had built a 10-inch telescope all by himself. He was a real engineer, non-degreed engineer. He was an older fellow, he's 5 years older than I am. So He had what it took. But he didn't have any good atlases. He had nothing. So, without telling Sky Publishing, I gave the atlas to Marty. And to spread out, to turn him into a co-defendant in this case. First rule of criminal defense: never try to defend two defendants at once, because they will try to sell one another out. So I am dragging him into this to make sure that we're going to spread the liability out here a little bit. He accepted the atlas. I cannot remember whether I told him exactly the full story. I cannot remember. I'm not sure whether he would have accepted the atlas had he known that I was pulling a conversion or a swindle.
It was hot goods.
Hot goods. I don't think he would have accepted it had he known. We are talking about 1964 here. So, he got Atlas, I got Atlas, for the price of one. Clever lad. Now, I'll bet you think this kept me awake through the decades. It didn't. Because after this began the age of alcohol, right? And it makes things all right, right? The world looks pretty good. Decades passed. And every once in a while I would think, you know, maybe I ought to square it with Sky Publishing. Yes, I'm a schmuck, but not that big a one. And it's not as if I do nothing good in the world. Maybe not that much, but it's not zero. This went on until we were at Astronomy at the Beach. You will remember it.
I remember it.
It was that miserable Astronomy at the Beach, I think it was 2010? Yes.
Yes.
It was that vile Astronomy at the Beach.
Hey.
It wasn't the, it wasn't the most vile Astronomy at the Beach, because it was the next year, 2011, where I had to back up against the canvas like this, with the blowing and the lightning and thunder to keep the canvas from coming in at our table. All right, that was 2011. This was merely awful. This was 2010.
Claude, this wasn't anything about the event. Wasn't it?
This was the weather. The event was all right. Right? We plowed on with the event. You know, the worst astronomy weather one can conceive, for God's sake. This is 2 consecutive Astronomy at the Beach events. I really think you people should get involved in this more heavily on a personal level, because the challenges. Now, where was I? You were sitting to my right. This is the answer man, right? You want to know anything, you go to Ken Burton. If you want a solution to the unified field theory, he'll get on his eye dork. He'll come up with something, right? Oh. You see, I am Mr. Mid-Century, but he is Mr. 22nd Century.
You are mid-18th.
He has been brought back from a future civilization. Anyway, having nothing to do with astronomy, because it was raining and blowing, I said, because he's a financier of sorts, I said, do you have any way of doing an inflation calculator? And he said, yeah, right? It's his business. He's a financial analyst, portfolio manager. I don't know, some hustle. I don't know. Yeah, right. So what he did is he did an inflation calculation going back $6.50, 1964, and what that thing would be worth today in the money of 2010. And he told me, and I can't remember, I can't remember what you said.
It was, I don't remember the exact figure, but it was substantially higher than the...
Well, vastly higher. Because I know this. I remember the day in 1979 when the news was that we were now 50 cents on the $67
Right.
through this inflationary time. I don't remember what happened subsequently. But from 1967 to 69, 12 stinking years, the dollar went to 50 cents. Right. So he did the calculation. So it was, I got up my courage, got up my courage. And a couple of months later, I wrote Sky Publishing a check and enclosed a note that said, "This is what the money is for. This is what happened." And I sent it off. And to the best of my knowledge, information, or belief, they cashed the check. I never heard anything. Basically, I didn't want to hear anything. And so, over all those decades, I managed finally to square it with them. Now,
Did you send them the $6? You send them the money we figured.
That's right. I sent them the money you calculated.
It was 40.
Yeah, well, I don't know, it wasn't 40, it was less than that.
It is, though, yeah, it wasn't much less than
Yeah, all right.
So
Yeah,
Far be it for me to take away your outlaw status, but the statute of limitations would have run out in 6 years. So
that's true.
you're right. You just need a 1970 crisis.
And if I had removed myself to Nicaragua, man, yeah, I still would, right, so kiss my dupa, right?
Is that check?
No, that's not Czech.
There's no
That's Polish.
limitation on moral
You're saying you wrote them a
retribution
check?
swallowed up anywhere.
Well,
I'm just talking
But
fraud.
that didn't take into account the collector's value.
Nicaragua.
Well, by this time, this thing is getting a little, long of tooth, and it's not in very good shape, so it doesn't have any collector's value. This has no collector's value. It's used like hell.
You wouldn't
It's
see it
ribbed
on
and everything.
Antiques Roadshow or something.
No, it's worthless. So they finally got their money. All right, we go from first Johnson administration to first Obama administration, or from Diefenbaker to what? All right, Stephen Harper, right? But they got their money at last, and I didn't try to dance or anything. I just told them, I screwed you, right? And now we're square. But all the people who worked at Sky and Telescope in the 1960s are long gone one way or another. And I'm sure that the people who work there now, and Sky Publishing, Sky and Telescope has gone through iterations of ownership and whatever. It didn't probably mean too much. They got this and they cashed the check and they thought, well, there's somebody out there with his screw loose. And I'm not going to dispute it. Right? I think a case could be made. So that is the story of my deep spiritual relationship with the Atlas of the Heavens, and please do not keep the ones that were distributed. They are valuable to me. And there's my story. I've come clean, right? I am washed. My soul has been cleansed. Now you know the awful truth that I am not as morally superior as I have been telling you for a long time. And I think I had most of you believing it, right?
Not
No.
me.
I am a bad man. Now I am a good man, or at least a better man.
Go forth and sin no more.
And I won't. Maybe we can run this 18-minute thing. There it is.
that UN came unknown.
unknown. Yeah.
Question?
Sure. Yeah.
Does anybody, to your knowledge, make one of these things that shows the colors of the stars these days?
Well, no, in old days, you're thinking of Atlas Eclipticalis and Atlas Borealis, which were published by Sky Publishing in 1972, I believe. And those are the big kind of cranberry. They're larger format than this. All right.
Yeah, I know online you can get all
All right. All the star colors are on Borealis and Eclipticalis, but there are no deep sky objects shown, no galactic borders, no nothing. It's just stars.
Did you use, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask. I can imagine using this to find a specific faint star in a couple of ways. One might use setting circles, or one might star hop.
Mm-hmm.
I presume you star hop?
Yes.
Okay. Beyond that, I have a comment that I've never used something like this. I've always used software on my computer or whatever. But I kind of like this because it makes it sort of more permanent. You know, I mean, you can see he's got little stickers on for stars he was following or would go back to, and it's always the same.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, you know, where was I in this software before or something.
You got to scroll through 8 years of stuff. Yeah.
So I think that's kind of nice. It makes a few stars, it helps make them have special significance, you know. I mean, for me, when I look at the double cluster, I like to remember which stars look red. You know, there are a few red ones, and I get to where I know where they are. I mean, there's a million stars up there, you know, when you're looking through a telescope, but it sort of makes it special or something for me, you know.
It is on a more personal basis because we are visual. We respond to visual cues. All right, rather than, as you point out, scrolling through some memory system. Yes, we like things in pictorial presentation. I mean, you know, 1.5 million years of hominid evolution can't be wrong.
And another point is this shows a fairly large piece of the sky.
Yes.
Tens of degrees in each direction. So it's not like you're zoomed into such a tiny piece of sky that it's sort of meaningless when you look up at the sky naked eye, you know. This is sort of why I like these ultra wide angle binoculars I talked about a couple years ago. When you look up in the sky, you're seeing so much of the sky that you know where you are in the sky. You know, when you use more conventional binoculars, you're only seeing a few degrees, and if you look around in the Milky Way and you see something interesting, and then you want to look at it naked eye or with a telescope, it's where was I? You know, it becomes a challenge. So I'm just saying I like the scale of this.
Gives you a better frame of reference.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it makes the sky that I see with my eyes more meaningful, because it's, you know, I typically look at a piece of sky that's roughly comparable with this piece of sky.
Maybe that's why they chose the scale. Yes, Bill.
On my copy, I have a sticker with a T and an X on it. What is your significance of the T and the X pointing at two different objects? I mean, what were you doing with the...
I think these were, it was a catalog of very red stars in the Observer's Handbook of the Royal Astronomical Society, and I was fixing to observe them. But I can't recall, because I've been using this for so long for so many different reasons, I don't remember all of what the stickers mean anymore.
What was SS?
I think that would be SS variable star.
That's the.
It's the designation of variable star,
Okay.
I think. There was a question?
You drew your own constellation lines in there?
My brother did. He was the artist of the family, still is. Right. He drew he had a white pencil. Because, get this thing, it's just this blizzard of points, right? We wanted constellation figures.
Do you know how he chose which lines to draw? I noticed that Centaurus didn't have very much.
No, it's because we got, he took it roughly from the field book of the skies, the constellation figures, because that was my atlas up to that point was the Alcott and Mayle. That was the final edition, 1954, the field book of the skies. Some of you may know about it, right? It was in the 50s, and well, the first edition was I think 1907. This was the standard field handbook for the amateur astronomer in North America. And Alcott and Mayle, the Mayals, and Alcott, they brought it out. Alcott had long passed away at this time. They brought out the final edition, the big fat one, in 1954. And everybody owned one. But you had to evolve beyond that after a point, and that's why I got the Atlas of the Heavens. I don't know. I think Field Book of the Sky has been out of print since maybe 1960, 65. Yes?
Do you have any knowledge of what kind of resources were involved with that original Czech Atlas to put it together in terms of man hours or cost or time interval?
There has been a history written on it, and I think it was in Sky and Telescope, God knows when. But there has been a history written, and to say there's a little introduction in this on the opening page here. But no, I don't.
Must have been considerable.
Well, it was massive.
Yeah.
They're having to comb through all kinds of disparate catalogs and compendia, and then do the cartography and check this, check that. I have found on this, I have found a couple of errors. But to be fair, there's so much data in this whole atlas, one would be surprised if there weren't.
What would be a frustration if you were to not use that atlas and you were to use a different atlas or catalog?
None. I've used Tyrions, and I've used, when I got to get down to 9.0, I've used the Atlas Eclipticalis or the Atlas Borealis. In fact, as recently as this week. But no, there would be no great, discontinuity. It's just that, as you point out, this is relatively easy to use. Tyrions, I'm not saying Tyrions isn't. I'm just more used to this. But Tyrion's is a fine atlas. It's wonderful. And there are others on software.
Yep,
as you well know.
You mentioned Tyrion.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them out now that he's had part in, and there's the, was it the 2000, which is fairly similar to the ones I've seen to the black and white one you passed around.
Right.
And I use uranometria, which is probably closer to the color version there. And are these different systems? It seems like they're all built on the prior ones, so it seems like they're getting maybe more and more accurate, more refined.
Well, this, I think, was taken directly from the original library edition. I don't think Sky Publishing made any alteration in the original library edition. But it would be wrong to imply that everybody is just making souped up versions of a previous atlas. Because when Will Tyrion started with his atlases, I don't even know when that was, I am sure that he and his colleagues did do additional research and fact-checking. I don't know. I don't know the history of the Tyrion Atlas. There's something in there to write about for an article in its own self.
I seem to recall a decade ago that somebody would reference something in the sky by their 1950 coordinates,
Yes.
and then it was year 2000 coordinates.
The decade, yeah.
Why, I mean, the stars aren't moving appreciably, right? So why these 50
Yes,
year?
they are.
Yeah,
Yes, they are.
yeah,
On
because
a
of the,
scale you could see on there?
Oh, I've gone through hell.
yeah.
I got something in 1950 coordinates, and I'm trying to transpose it to 2000, and I don't have the mathematical skills, or I don't have a program to do this, so I'm roughing it in visually. As recently as within the last week, I've got my Atlas Eclipticalis, which is 1950, and I'm trying to find a star with 2000 coordinates, and it's not as easy as you think with small scale fields. It's no, I mean large scale fields, where it's harder than you think.
I could probably answer that. It's the epic, like the 2000, like that, and that's basically, I think, on the, where the Earth is moving around this axis, and that's what it's doing is changing the coordinates, the right ascension declination.
So it's not that there's an appreciable shift in the stars,
No,
but in the Earth, in the celestial coordinates.
That's
right.
right.
That's it. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. 'Cause if you go to like on my computers, where if I enter in coordinates, depending which ones you get, if you go ones back 1950, it will be in a different location it goes to, rather than one that are more current. 2010 or whatever epic.
I think Arcturus, though, is moving at about the
Mm-hmm.
diameter of the moon every 300 years, so there are some fast movers.
Oh yeah, that's the classic quote-unquote high velocity population 2 star, right? And that's all right. It can do what it wants to do. May it go in peace. I do not care, right? It's happy, I'm happy. But that is the most prominent example of a bright high velocity star.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, some of these things are moving pretty fast, but very few that fast.
So what magnitude does it go to, and is it consistent in the magnitude? Are all of the stars of a given magnitude?
That goes to magnitude. Well, the thing you passed around went to magnitude almost 8. Okay.
7.75, but there's some slop in that, as I've found. This is 7.75. Atlas, Eclipticalis, and Borealis go down to 9.0, more or less. And Tyrion goes to what? I can't remember.
A little bit over 9. For your annimetry, it's a little bit over 9.
All right. Okay. And beyond that, you're getting into individual charts like AVSO charts or whatever, right? So, but we're just talking about what are now. Yes, this is obsolete. Okay. To be fair about it. It is in terms of what is now available by all media, be it online, be it on DVD, on DVD, whatever. This is obsolete, but it's still extremely useful for the field observer. And
even if the coordinates have shifted somewhat because of the migration of the Earth's axis in the sky, if you're star hopping, it doesn't matter.
No, doesn't. And Arcturus, if it wants to slip a cog, I won't look at it. That's it. Right. I can live without Arcturus. Yeah.
Did you ever find out who and why placed the first copy in the closet?
I think it was my dad. It was one of my parents who found the thing on the porch, put it in the closet, and forgot about it. Because, as I say, my brother and I never used the front closet by the front door.
Was it still in the box?
It was still in the box. I never said anything to them because when I thought I could pull the caper with Marty, I didn't want to attract any official attention, let's say. This was something that was done, as they say in the Soviet days, for the drawer.
So the bottom line is your dad made a criminal out of you.
or my mother. See, I mean, you can't just come on with a shotgun pleadings and have this dragnet. You got to be, specific with when you file. So we have diffused the blame enough. One of them did it. One of them did it. And I'm thinking it was my mom, because she would be home more often during the day when the mail came or whatever, and she probably did it. But after a point, there are things you just don't want to know, right? Deniability.
So you don't think it was a deliberate act for any reason?
No, no. I never did consider sabotage from within the organization, right? This is how purges start, right? Oh, after a while you think, well, everybody's out to get everybody else, right? And then the whole system implodes slowly. No, it was not deliberate.
Well, weren't you running the risk that eventually you would occur to, whichever parent did it, that, oh yeah, but I forgot, all about this, it's in the closet, and say, oh yeah, well, where is it?
See, it was like a shell game. They knew I had the thing, so they reckoned that it was the original, right? But it wasn't. I didn't tell them what I did.
Or it's funny that just before your mom passed, she didn't fess up.
She had forgotten about this. I never mentioned any of this. Everybody has just kind of passed on, and it's slowly being buried, except now it is recorded for posterity of what an ass I am. Yeah, go ahead.
So, after many decades, you came clean to Sky Publishing.
Yeah.
Have you come clean to your friend that you gave him stolen goods?
That's a good question.
I called him in San Diego. And he went, and he's extremely organized. I mean, he makes me look like some sort of a maniac. He's extremely organized, and his atlas is in the original box, and he told me the postmark on it. Yes. So, Martin Nathan Mill now knows what happened. That this was a form of larceny. He now knows. But I cannot remember the transaction in 1964. I really can't recall how I did this shell game with him.
But he's got the smoking gun. He's got the original box.
That's right.
He's the one you have to worry about.
I am the president of this club. Absolve him.
Yeah, that's right. I will make a pilgrimage.
All right, so how long did you ponder this before deciding to tell us all?
How long did I think about before deciding?
Before admitting this.
In this?
Right.
Oh, it must have been 15 or 20 minutes. I mean, I can act decisively.
I shamed him at that meeting.
Well, actually, the reels started rolling when we were discussing it at astronomy at the beach. Yes. So we better get out of here. Pop that DVD out of there. Let's get out of here. The Atlas lives. Please return. All right, I will leave it out here.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Before Senator needs an audience for his testimony.
Gary, I never got my copy of the original Atlas. Can you send me another one?
I could give you this one because I may graduate to Tirion for your anniversary.
So there's this big box about a little bit bigger than this.